Thank you very much, and I first of all is delighted to thank the Accademia di San Luca and the organizers of this conference for the possibility to speak on this subject. Maybe I have chosen a very specific way to try to show these relations between Italian and British tradition in Russian architecture and its interaction. But I really think that they were interfering in a most intensive way in the head of the Empress Catherine the Great, and whom you see. And in the place which she preferred more than anything else, it is her famous summer residence, Tsarskoye Selo, near St. Petersburg. As you know, she was a German princess from Anhalt, the Princess of Anhalt-Zerbst, and her cousin, Leopold Friedrich Franz, the Fürst und Herzog von Anhalt-Dessau, made of his small country, as small as the Catherine's father's one, a garden kingdom, as he called it, Gartenreich. And the size of Tsarskoye Selo and its suburbs, built mostly by many architects, by mostly Italian and British, were of the size of this Gartenreich in Germany. It was really an enormous complex of palaces, parks, towns, villages, and churches and other things. And I'm trying to show, and this is because this was the most the dearest thing for the Empress' heart. I'll try to show the interaction of these two influences, Italian and British, on inside this garden kingdom of Catherine the Great, of her private kingdom, if you like. She did not appreciate the work of another enormously talented Italian architect, Bartolomeo Rastrelli, who made the regular palace there, and who worked in Russia for her predecessor, Elizabeth I, whom Catherine disliked, and so she disliked this man on this portrait, Bartolomeo Rastrelli, who immediately left Russia, leaving these enormous regular palaces with gilded enfilades. And she, by her imperial capacities, ordered to introduce classicism. And the first classicism she did put into the Russian environment was the French one, brought by Jean-Baptiste Valin de la Motte, the nephew of Blondel the Younger. And this was a very regular and gigantesque style. But Catherine the Great was very soon, already in the end of the 1760s, very disappointed with this style. This was already quoted, several of her letters to Reichenstein and Melchior Grimm, both to Rome and to Paris. But in one of the lines from these letters, it was said, "I'm totally tired of those French who know too much and who built bad houses only because they know too much. And I want two Italians And then she was already quoted the negotiations, which was led by Manx and approved by Grimm in Rome, which led to the coming of Giacomo Quarenghi and Giacomo Trambara. But Catherine the Great, in another letter where she was saying that she is waiting for Giacomo Trambara and Giacomo Quarenghi, she wrote that I have already an architect who spent a lot of years in Rome and who inflamed my imagination. It was Charles Cameron. And he happened to come first. And the British influence happened to come slightly earlier, that one which brought Quarenghi. Because first, Catherine the Great was living not in Tsarskoye Selo, but in Peterhof, in Oranienbaum, on the banks of the Baltic Sea. And there she began to install the British parks in the middle of the 70s. This is the drawing of first English gardener, James Meader, who came and made the first English park in Russia, near the Peterhof, now how it looks like today. And when Quarenghi, it is the plan of the park, and when Quarenghi came his first commission from Catherine was the imperial palace in this English park with a big lake. I'm sorry. This is Quarenghi's drawing of the palace itself and the old photo, because it was destroyed during the war and badly restored. So it is evidently a Palladian building, but it had a prototype. Catherine wanted to copy the palace in Wörlitz, his cousin's Friedrich Leopold Franz von Anhalt-Dessau's palace, the owner of this Gartenreich in Anhalt. And you see that it is evidently close in design, nevertheless the Quarenghi's one is bigger. But in Wörlitz, there is the evidence of the links, which are many times already mentioned. On the lake, one of the follies was the stone Vesuvius, which was burning in night as a volcano. And this red house was Lord Hamilton's villa on the slope of Vesuvius, which really, of course it was only a symbol, but which existed in the reality. And this was the prototype which was forced on Quarenghi. At the same time, while Quarenghi was working in Peterhof, the main attention of Catherine the Great was put to her Gartenreich in Tsarskoye Selo. It is, you can see the plan of it. It is very complex. This, you see the regular part of Rastrelli, the picturesque part planned by another English gardener, Joseph Bush. Many buildings by different architects filled this park, and the town planned by Charles Cameron. But Catherine the Great wanted most of all, as it was already mentioned, because it was fashionable, to build a palace in a form of the Roman baths. And this was the reason to invite Italians and then this one English, one British, Charles Cameron. But first, traditionally, she addressed to French Academy with a letter asking for a place where Cicero and Caesar could meet at once and could spend time, and where one could eat and walk and bath and so on. And Charles de Vailly made a design who she disliked. Charles Louis Clarisseau made another design. which as well was disliked. One was too small for her dimension, the Charles the Vai ones, and this was too big because it was bigger than the Rastrelli's palace, was about 400 meters long. And she addressed to a person whom he thought to be of a very special nationality. He considered that he is a Roman Scot. It is Charles Cameron, because, and there really was such a person who was called Charles Cameron and who lived all his life in Rome. And he was a cousin to the architect who was from a prominent Scottish family of Loch Eel, Camerons of Loch Eel, and then his father came to London, and it happened so that the future architect and the son of a very famous rebellion, one of the Camerons of Loch Eel, were brought together, and they both were called Charles because of the Charles Edward Stuart, the pretender to the throne, so on his behalf. And so there was really a very strong link between Charles Cameron and Rome, the link which was continuous and which is expressed in a Roman magazine which was published during 80s, Memorie per la Belle Arti. So he came to Catherine the Great. He said that he liked Clariso. When Quarenghi, who soon arrived, was asked, does he know Cameron or how he liked him, he said that he is a very special person, and his works cannot be imagined if one does not see them. And this is really the first works of Charles Cameron, who somehow put into the imperial palace of Rastrelli his imagination of the Roman bus. It is the green dining room, the arabesque hall, the sleeping room of the great dukes, and this is the famous boudoir of Catherine the Great called tabatière. It was all made of enamel with silver, bronze, and different precious stones. It was all destroyed in the Second World War. It looked like that on the watercolor of Primazzi. And the last room Cameron put into the palace was most eccentric. It did not exist, and it was very soon rebuilt after it was erected. But you can see his design. It is all the walls were of mirrors, and he put in the middle a very big palm tree, painted naturally, and on the mirrors as well the palm trees. So it was a limitless, because of the mirror effect, palm forest from where such a view was opened. The English Park lifted to the first floor, one story up, with Roman bus built there. It is the drawing of Cameron himself, and it is important that he not only was called to do this because he was the specialist on the Roman bus, because of this enormous book which he inherited from Burlington, then from Isaac Ware, and at last finished, so which was really the activity of 3 generations of English Palladian architects, convinced that not only the 4 books of Palladio are important, but as well his drawings of and measurements of the Roman termini and the buildings of the antiquity. So this was the heart of the garden kingdom, the ideal of the antiquity made alive. And Catherine the Great wrote a lot about that. This is the interior of the bus, the central room, the temple-like facade, and the whole Cameron Gallery, which was the gallery to make promenade in bad weather, and as well it was the problem of security. She was afraid to be attacked in the garden, and so she preferred to walk above the garden. This theme of the ancient glory was supported immediately by Quarenghi, who built nearby this wonderful music pavilion with the real antiquity mosaics inside. Unfortunately, they are now in reparation and it's impossible to make a photograph. But she was wonderful writing about them to Reifenstein, to Rome, where these mosaics were found, which are inside. And Reifenstein was saying that they are too expensive. And Catherine the Great answered, well, you know, they were used by Emperor Claudius, and they will be used by me. And then, when we all die in 2 years and time, from the ruins of my palace, they will be taken by the future crazy emperor of China, who would be very interested in antiquities. So it was really the kind of a past seen from the future. And this was Quarenghi who underlined this idea of the classical motives in the main residence of Catherine the Great, in the heart of Russian Enlightenment. This is his kitchen for the music pavilion, where there were private banquets, with the real parts of the monument of the antiquity put by Quarenghi inside in the decoration of his building. But it was a very complex story, or very complex ideas were in this Garden Reich. This is the portrait of Catherine the Great, and look where her finger is pointing. She's pointing on the column which is taken from Stowe, from the famous Lord Capcom residence, and made a symbol of Russian naval victories over Turks. And this, exactly from this point, it was seen with the cupola of a church which was considered to be the copy of Hagia Sophia in Constantinople. And there was a lot of, she wrote to Voltaire that all my garden will look like a toy when this war, if this war continues, each battle is depicted by a special memorial. This is an enormous, this is a symbol of ancient Greece, the new empire she wanted for her grandson Constantine, who was named Constantine after Constantine the Great, and who was surrounded by Greek children and so on. Then there was this theme of chivalry, once more of a kind of knight's game, coming from England, of course, and especially from Horace Walpole, from whom she bought his picture collection. This is, as you can see, Strawberry Hill, and this is the Palace of Potemkin in the same garden, drawn by Quarenghi and built by everybody, by Charles Cameron, Quarenghi, and several Russian architects. Unfortunately, it is now in a ruined form. And it was copied in the others nearby palaces of Potemkin and other generals, which you can see in this place. But another theme, very important for Catherine, was the theme of Chinese or East Oriental dream. This is a German architect, Johann Gerhard, who proposed this as the main entrance to the imperial residence. This is all the Chinese buildings, well, nearly all the Chinese buildings in models of the 18th century before they were destroyed during the Second World War. They were just put into boxes, and then, unfortunately, the train where they were was bombed. So we can see only this. And This is the old photograph of the Chinese part of Tsarskoye Selo. There in a distance, you can see a copy of the cross bridge from the book of James and William Halfpenny, Chinese Architecture. Cameron made this once more, as in the Green Dining Room. He made Chinese figures nearly alive. And it was really a revival, not only of antiquity, but the revival of everything very different in the world. This is the Chinese temple just above the main entrance to the residence of the Empress, and drawn by Quarenghi. And you can see, it is the unique view. Only here you can see a kind of a play or toy town built by Charles Cameron in Palladian style for Catherine the Great, where she made to live special people, organized many schools, advanced factories, and so on, a kind of ideal town of this Gartenreich. This all was designed by Cameron. You can see the plan, which where all the axes of the streets are coming to the Roman baths, which you have seen as the center of all this ensemble. This is Cameron's design for Hagia Sophia copy, but it was built, as Quarenghi have shown here, by many architects. There's at least 10 architects participated. It is the church of Santa Sofia as it looks in the late 18th century. And now it looks like that. And this is the Charles Cameron Palladian model houses of big scale. There was in other types. And behind them, Quarenghi built in the different villages a series of churches and the houses. Unfortunately, we don't have any design of any house, but the churches are there all around in this enormous territory where the land was cultivated in a special way, where the forested were cleaned. So it was really an ideal country of a scale of a real German duchy. And as well, a part of this complex was Pavlovsk, the residence of the heir to the throne, made by Charles Cameron, and then one small city of Pavlovsk at that time, with the plan by Quarenghi, the park by Charles Cameron with his pavilions, and the Quarenghi's hospital, which was the main center of this second town of the Gartenreich of Catherine the Great. But then into this is the end already, then big politics rushed into this ideal antique and natural space. It was the choosing the heir to the throne. Catherine hated her son, Paul I, and he hated her because she thought that she ordered to kill his father, Peter III, and I think he had reasons, and she had some reasons because he was rather mad after all difficulties of his childhood. And she wanted, and she left a will for Alexander, the son of Paul, her elder grandson, was made emperor. And for him, Quarenghi builds a new palace in this Gartenreich, a new heart of this Enlightenment country. In really monumental scale, once more inside with some quotation of the building of the Roman towns. And he participated, but the main author was Ivan Starov, in building another palace for the future called Pella. But this future never came to life. Pella was built, Alexander's palace is still in the place, but Alexander I did not dare to kill his father. At least he postponed this for 4 years. And Quarenghi and Cameron were left nearly in disgrace. But they stayed with their friends, whom you see on this small picture. They're different German engineers. Quarenghi was more fortunate. Alexander the I, I'm sorry, ordered him to build this famous manege for the horse guards. And, but of course, the time of Quarenghi and of Cameron, of this interaction of Italian and British trends in Russian architecture, as it existed, in the form it has existed in the second half of the 18th century, it has passed. But not the traditions. I will say only a few words. Alexander I, according to the will both of Catherine the Great depicted there, and I think as a hair of Peter the Great, who is there on the horse in the back of this portrait, he ordered to 2 architects. One was the pupil of Quarenghi, the second pupil of Cameron, of Luigi Rusca and William Hastie, to make typical or model designs. And they made 228 model designs for private houses. And then they made model designs for everything: prisons, palaces, churches, gates, small fences, bridges, everything in 8 big volumes. And this was the unification in, as you can see, the Palladian manner of the British and Italian tradition. And Alexander I gave to this design the force of the civil code, the codex. You understand it? They were included into the codex of laws of the Russian Empire, and nobody could build in principle something differently. And this is the plan of Tsarskoye Selo by Hastie, with all these houses and his model quarters and so on. 111 towns were remade during his life of Emperor Alexander I, like that, in this combined British, Italian or Italian-British mode. And it really finished the creation of the new image of the enlightened empire, very rigid, because as well they made about some thousand of military settlements where soldiers had to be peasants at the same time. This is one of them, called Gruzino, the capital of these military settlements, commanded by Count Arakcheyev. So this was the whole story of this interaction, which changed the whole environment of the Russian Empire. And those changes are still in place, and we hope, to some extent, as far as we can, to preserve them. Thank you.
Interessantissima comunicazione che appunto approfondisce anche questo periodo russo dopo l'italiano e con queste immagini, certo lo conoscevamo meno il periodo russo, comunque almeno io lo conoscevo meno, e queste bellissime immagini che lo insomma, lo documentano. Per cui adesso chiamiamo l'ultimo relatore, no l'ultimo, il penultimo relatore, Mark William Jones, che ci parlerà appunto dei modelli classici romani e della loro interpretazione. Adesso vedremo se hanno un'attinenza con la precedente comunicazione, non lo so, forse.